Do you know why you're still alive, Agatha? The room was cold. Concrete walls, a single light swinging from the ceiling, casting shadows that moved like something breathing. Agatha sat in a metal chair, wrists unbound but her body locked in place, not by chains, by the voice of the man sitting 3 feet across from her. She couldn't see his full face, just his hands, a gold ring on his left finger, a scar running across his knuckle, pale and deliberate, like it carried a story she didn't want to hear. Those hands rested on the table between them with a patience that made her skin crawl. She swallowed hard, clenched her jaw, but she did not look away. "Because you need me." The man leaned forward. The light caught half his face, sharp jaw, hollow smile, eyes that calculated everything and felt nothing. No." His voice was almost gentle, almost. "Because killing you would hurt my brother more than any bullet I could ever put in him." Something flashed behind Agatha's eyes, not fear, something older, hotter, something forged in the kind of fire this man would never understand. "Then you don't know me at all?" Her voice came out low and even, the voice of a woman who had already survived worse than him. "I'm nobody's weakness." He smiled, slowly, then reached into his jacket pocket and slid a photograph across the table. Agatha looked down. Her breath vanished. It was her, standing outside her mother's restaurant in Lagos, the old one, with the faded blue paint and the hand-lettered sign. She was wearing the yellow dress she'd bought at Balogun Market. She remembered that exact day, a Thursday. She'd been laughing at something a customer said. This photograph was taken 6 months before she ever set foot in South Korea. She had never posed for it. She had never known it existed. "You're right," the man whispered, leaning back into the shadows. "You're not his weakness, Agatha. You're something far more dangerous." He paused. Let the silence work. "You were the plan. From the very beginning." Her hands trembled, not from fear, from the earthquake happening inside her chest. Every memory, every coincidence, every moment that had led her to this room suddenly looked different, rearranged, like a puzzle she thought she'd been solving, that had actually been solving her. But how did she get here? How did a struggling girl from Lagos end up in a dark room with the most dangerous man in Seoul, and staring at proof that nothing in her life had been an accident? It started the way most beautiful disasters do, with a friend, a phone call, and a dress she didn't want to wear. 8 months before that warehouse, Agatha Williams was standing in the wreckage of her mother's restaurant in Surulere, Lagos. The roof had leaked through the ceiling during the rainy season. Mold climbed the walls like something alive. The landlord had already sold the building to a developer. She had 30 days to leave and nowhere to go. Her phone rang. "Keela." "Aga, listen to me before you say no." "I'm already saying no." "Seoul, Aga, South Korea. I've been here 11 months, and I'm telling you, there's space for what you do. These people love food. They love new experiences. And there's a gap in this city for African cuisine that nobody is filling." "Kayla, I can't just—" "I already found a small space in Ida 1. Rent is manageable. I'll help you with the deposit. You bring your mother's recipes, and you build something new." Agatha looked around the crumbling restaurant. Water stains on the photograph of her mother she hadn't been able to take down yet. The menu board with her mother's handwriting, fading. "There's nothing left for you there, Aga." Keela's voice softened. "And I'm not watching you drown from across the world. Come." Agatha closed her eyes, pressed the phone against her forehead. Every rational thought screamed, "Stay. Stay where things are familiar, where the language is yours, where the soil knows your name." But familiarity had given her nothing but loss. Okay." 3 weeks later, she landed at Incheon Airport with 2 suitcases, Her mother's handwritten recipe cards wrapped in a plastic bag inside her bra because she trusted nothing and no one with those, and $600 to her name. Soul hit her like a wall, the language she couldn't speak, the signs she couldn't read, the cold that cut through her jacket like it wasn't there. People stared, not with hostility, but with a curiosity that made her feel like an exhibit rather than a person. Keela was there at the airport, arms wide, screaming her name across the arrivals hall like they were the only two people on Earth. "Agay, you made it! You actually made it!" They held each other for a long time. Two African women in a sea of strangers, holding on like the other one was a life raft. Keela helped her find the apartment, tiny, cold, on the 5th floor of a building with no elevator. She helped her set up the restaurant space, painting walls, dragging in second-hand furniture, printing menus at a shop where the owner didn't speak a word of English but smiled and gave them extra copies for free. And for a while, it almost felt like hope. But Seoul was expensive. Customers were slow, and the money bled out faster than it came in. Within 4 months, Agatha was drowning again, just in a different ocean, 10,000 kilometers from home. That was when Keela made another call, the one about Julian Crane. If that twist just stopped your heart, if your mind is already racing trying to figure out who took that photograph and why, then you're exactly where you need to be tonight. Hey, welcome to Afro-Korean Stories TV. We don't just tell stories here. We make you feel them in your bones. If this is your first time with us, go ahead and subscribe right now. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling us, who do you think took that photograph of Agatha in Lagos? We want to hear your theory before the truth comes out. Now, let's go back to where it all began. 6 months earlier, on a rain-soaked Tuesday night in Seoul, Agatha Williams stood in the kitchen of her tiny restaurant and counted the same crumpled bills for the 3rd time. Still not enough. Never enough. The restaurant had been her lifeline, a piece of Lagos planted in the middle of a city that didn't know her name, her mother's jollof rice recipe handwritten on index cards taped to the wall, the plantain and suya on the menu next to kimchi and bulgogi. She'd named it Mama's Bridge because that's what food was supposed to be, a bridge between worlds, but bridges cost money, and Agatha was drowning. The front door scraped open. She didn't bother looking up. "We're closed. I know you're closed." Mr. Park, her landlord, stood in the doorway with his arms folded and his patience expired. "You're all so late. 3 months now, Miss Williams." "I'll have it by Friday." "You said that last Friday?" "Then I'll say it again this Friday. Consistency is a virtue, Mr. Park." He didn't laugh. He scanned the empty restaurant with the expression people wear at funerals, pity mixed with finality. "Maybe this African food concept doesn't work here. Maybe it's time to accept that and—" "Friday." Agatha's voice sharpened to a point. Not aggressive, not rude, just final, the way her mother used to end conversations she was done having. He left. The door scraped shut behind him, and the silence that filled her restaurant weighed more than anything he'd said. Agatha sank onto a plastic stool. Her eyes drifted to the framed photograph on the wall, her mother, standing in front of the original restaurant in Surulere, Lagos, tired, beautiful, unbreakable, until the world broke her anyway. She whispered in Yoruba, "Mama, Emma worry, mo and try." "Don't worry, I'm trying." It was the same phrase every time, the same 3 words in Yoruba that fell out of her mouth whenever the world pressed too hard. She didn't remember where she'd learned them, that they just lived inside her, like something inherited, something planted before memory. Her phone buzzed. Keela's face exploded onto the screen before Agatha could wipe her eyes. "Aga, why do you look like somebody canceled your destiny?" "Because somebody might have. The rent—" "Forget the rent for 60 seconds and listen to me. I found someone for you." "Keela, I don't need—" His name is Julian Crane, American lawyer. Works at a big international firm right here in Seoul. Keela was applying lipstick with one hand and holding the phone with the other, a talent Agatha had never understood and never would. He's educated. He's stable. No baby mama drama, no wahala. And She lowered her voice for effect. The man is fine. I don't care if he looks like he was sculpted by angels. I need paying customers, not a boyfriend. You need both. And honestly, the boyfriend might actually feed you for once. Agatha pressed her lips together, tried not to smile, failed. Thursday night, Keela continued. Nice restaurant in Itaewon. Reservation is made. Just show up, wear something decent, and let something good happen to you for once in your stubborn life. And if he's boring, then eat the free dinner and come home. Aga, what do you have to lose? Nothing. That was the truth she couldn't argue with. She had absolutely nothing left to lose. Fine. One date. Yes. Okay. Wear something elegant, and I mean elegant. Not that thing you wore to Brother Emeka's wedding. What was wrong with everything, Aga? Every single thing was wrong with that dress. They laughed, genuinely. And for a handful of seconds, the weight on Agatha's chest lifted just enough for air to get through. But as they hung up, something crossed Keela's face. Brief, barely visible. A flicker that looked like guilt, or maybe fear, before the screen went dark. Thursday arrived too fast. Agatha stood in front of her cracked bathroom mirror, pulling at the hem of a simple black dress she'd bought 2 years ago and never worn. It still fits. Her braids were pulled back. Minimal makeup, small gold earrings her mother had given her on Christmas before she died. She stared at her own reflection, took one breath, then another. One date? She whispered to herself. Just one. The restaurant was the kind of place that made you hyper-aware of every imperfection you'd ever had. Soft golden lighting, subdued music, couples leaning into each other over wine glasses. The air smelled like money and restraint. Agatha felt every pair of eyes in the room, or imagined she did, which was worse. The hostess smiled, polished, practiced. Table 8, she said, gesturing toward the back. Agatha walked through the dining room, chin lifted, shoulders pressed back, the way her mother had taught her to carry herself through rooms that weren't built for women like them, until she reached the table. A man was seated there, alone, dark suit, precisely tailored. A jaw that looked carved rather than born, eyes that held no warmth and hadn't for years. A glass of whiskey sat in front of him, completely untouched, as if even the drink understood it should wait. He radiated something she couldn't name. Not danger, exactly. Stillness. The kind of quiet that has nothing to do with peace. The kind that means a storm is holding its breath. This must be Julian, she thought. Keela was right. He was a lot. She sat down across from him, extended her hand, offered a smile that almost hid the fact that her heart was hammering against her ribs. Hi, I'm Agatha. You must be my blind date. The man looked at her hand, then her face, and something shifted behind his eyes, barely visible, like a locked door that hadn't been touched in years, suddenly rattling. He was not Julian Crane, and he was waiting for a contact, a man who was already 25 minutes late for a meeting that had nothing to do with dinner. This woman was clearly at the wrong table. He should have corrected her. 5 words. You have the wrong table. And her life would have stayed small and safe and ordinary. But the way she looked at him, directly, openly, without the fear that lived behind everyone else's eyes when they sat across from him, sit down. She was already sitting. But the way he said it, like he just crossed a line he could never uncross, sent something through her spine that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. She had just sat across from Dong Dante, the youngest Don of the most powerful crime family in Seoul, and she had absolutely no idea. The conversation came slowly. Carefully. Two strangers testing water with their fingertips before stepping in. Agatha talked about her restaurant, about Lagos, about how her mother used to say jollof rice could heal anything, a broken heart, a terrible day, even a terrible man. She'd say, "Agatha, any man who eats your food and still misbehaves, that one is beyond saving." Something moved across Dong's face. Not quite a smile, but close. "She sounds wise." She was the wisest person I've ever known. Agatha's voice softened. "She's gone now. I'm sorry." He didn't rush past it. Didn't fill the space with empty words. He sat inside the grief with her, quietly, respectfully, like a man who understood that some losses don't need commentary. They need room. "What do you do?" she asked, steering the conversation forward. "How about family business?" "Do you enjoy it?" His fingers turned the whiskey glass. One slow, full rotation before he answered. "No." "Then why do you do it?" He looked at her, and for one unguarded second the mask slipped. What she saw underneath was not cold, it was exhausted. Drowning. A man buried alive inside a life he never chose. "Because no one gave me a choice." Neither of them spoke for a long moment after that. The restaurant hummed around them, but Table 8 had become its own universe. Small, fragile, and startlingly honest. Meanwhile, 2 tables away, 2 men sat with untouched menus and watchful eyes. One of them pulled out a phone. "He's not meeting the contact. He's with some woman. No, I don't know who she is. What do we do?" The evening shattered without warning. Then 3 men walked into the restaurant. No raised voices, no commotion. But the atmosphere thinned instantly, like oxygen had been rationed and only certain people were still allowed to breathe. Dong transformed between one heartbeat and the next. The warmth evaporated. What replaced it was something ancient and predatory, a man who had grown up knowing that composure and violence lived one breath apart. "Don't move." His voice was low, almost tender. "Don't turn around, Agatha." Her pulse tripled. She saw a waiter freeze mid-step and silently retreat. Behind her, voices exchanged in Korean, sharp, clipped, coiled, and she felt danger like heat from an open flame pressing against her back. Dong never raised his voice. Not once. Whatever he said, measured, deliberate, precise, made the tallest of the 3 men take a visible step backward. There was a single suffocating moment where the entire restaurant balanced on a razor's edge. Then the men turned and walked out. The room exhaled. Silverware clinked again. Conversations resumed, but Agatha's hands were shaking under the table so violently she pressed them against her thighs and still couldn't make them stop. "Who are you?" she whispered. Dong stood, placed a stack of bills on the table, far more than the meal was worth, adjusted his jacket, looked at her one final time, and what she saw in his eyes was not danger. It was regret. The wrong man. He walked out, and Agatha sat alone at Table 8 with a racing heart and a single question she couldn't stop turning over in her mind. Why? Did the wrong man feel so right? 45 minutes later, Julian Crane arrived. Handsome, apologetic, every hair in place, every word carefully selected. "I'm looking for my date," he told the hostess. "Agatha Williams?" "I'm sorry, sir. She left about 45 minutes ago, with the gentleman at Table 8. Julian's polished smile collapsed. He stepped outside, made a phone call. When he spoke, every trace of charm had been stripped away, replaced by something cold and operational. "We have a problem. Dong Dante left with the girl." He listened, his jaw clenched tight. "No. She doesn't know anything. But if she's in his orbit now, this changes everything." He hung up, stared at his phone for a long moment. then whispered something that would have turned Agatha's blood to ice if she'd been standing close enough to hear it. "Who sent her to his table?" 2 days passed. Agatha tried to bury that night under long hours and hot oil, scrubbing every surface of her restaurant like she could wipe the memory clean. It didn't work. Every time her front door opened, her breath caught, half hoping, half terrified. It was never him. Until a black car stopped outside on the second morning. A man in a tailored suit walked in, set a thick envelope on the counter, and walked out without a single word. Inside, cash. More cash than Agatha had held in her hands at one time in her entire life. Enough for 6 months of rent, maybe more, and a note written in sharp, clean handwriting. "For the restaurant, A.D." No phone number, no return address, just the faint scent of expensive cologne on the paper. Keela told her to take it. "Aga, do you understand how many people pray for this kind of miracle?" Agatha stared at the money. Her fingers hovered over the bills. Every logical nerve in her brain screamed to accept. Pay the rent, save the restaurant, survive another month. But her pride, that stubborn, Lagos-born, fire-tested, unshakable pride, wrapped itself around her chest and refused to let go. "It's not a miracle," she said quietly. "It's a leash." She went to find Dong, to return every single bill, and that decision, proud, reckless, completely irrational, pulled her through a door that would never swing the other direction. She found him at a private club in Gangnam, but talked her way past the entrance with a confidence she was only half feeling. Walked straight to his booth, past men built like concrete walls, and placed the envelope on the table between them. "I don't take handouts, especially from men I don't know." Dong looked at the envelope, then at her, and something crossed his face that she hadn't seen before. Not amusement exactly, closer to wonder, like he couldn't quite believe she was real. "You tracked me down, crossed Seoul, to return money you obviously need, because of pride? Because of principle." "In my world, those are the same thing." She almost smiled. Almost. But then a door at the back of the lounge opened. Men walked in carrying metal briefcases. Voices dropped to whispers. And the energy in the room shifted from controlled to coiled, tightening like a spring pressed past its limit. Agatha felt it before she understood it. Her body knew. Every nerve fired at once. Dong noticed her. His expression changed instantly. "You need to leave. Now." What was Agatha? Now. But it was already too late. She'd been seen. One of the men from the back room pointed at her, spoke rapidly in Korean to Dong's lieutenant. The lieutenant leaned in close and murmured something Agatha couldn't hear. She didn't need to hear it. His eyes delivered the message clearly enough. She had become a problem. Dong's response cut through the room like a blade laid flat against bare skin. "She is under my protection. Anyone who touches her answers to me. Personally." Nobody argued. And nobody breathed. And Agatha stood in the middle of that room, heart slamming against her ribs, palms slick, understanding with perfect, terrible clarity that she had just stepped into a world that doesn't allow people to step back out. Now, if this story has its grip on you, if you feel those walls closing in around Agatha the same way she does, then do something for us. Hit subscribe if you haven't already, like this video, and drop a comment telling us, would you have kept that money or returned it? Because we are far from finished. The twist that's coming next changes absolutely everything. Dong offered her a deal. Fund her restaurant legitimately, equipment, renovations, everything. And in return, she'd host private business dinners. Clean conversations in a clean space, nothing illegal on her end. And she said no. Then Mr. Park came back, not with threats this time, with an eviction notice. Printed, official, 7 days. No money, no backup, no path home that didn't taste like surrender. She went back to Dong, and this time she said yes, but on her terms. I don't work for you. She held his gaze like it was a rope over a cliff. I work with you, as your equal, and you will never, ever lie to me. He studied her, a long silence. Then something surfaced behind his eyes, warm, human, alive, before he buried it again. Deal. A week into their arrangement, Agatha did something she hadn't planned. She cooked for him. Not at the restaurant, not as part of a deal or a business dinner. And if she showed up at his penthouse unannounced with a cooler bag and a look on her face that dared him to ask questions. What is this? Dong asked, watching her walk past him into his kitchen like she owned it. Sit down and be quiet. He sat down. He was quiet. And for the first time in possibly his entire adult life, someone used his kitchen for its actual purpose. She made her mother's jollof rice, the real one, not the restaurant version she'd adjusted for Korean palates, the original. Heavy on the tomato, Scotch bonnet that meant business, smoky rice that stuck together the way it was supposed to. She set the plate in front of him. He stared at it like it was something sacred. Eat, she said. He took one bite, then another. Then he set the fork down slowly. And when he looked up at her, his eyes were wet. He didn't cry. He was not the kind of man who cried in front of people. But something behind those walls shifted. A crack she could see, even if he'd never admit it was there. My mother used to cook for me, he said quietly. Before she died, before any of this. He gestured vaguely around the penthouse. The cold marble, the sharp angles, the empire pressed into every surface. Nobody has cooked for me since. Not like this. Agatha sat down across from him, not speaking, just being there. The way he had sat inside her grief at that restaurant the first night, quietly, without rushing to fill the silence. They stayed like that for a long time. Two people who had lost their mothers to worlds that demanded too much. Eating jollof rice in a penthouse that had never smelled like home before. And for one evening, the war outside those windows didn't exist. That was the night Agatha realized she wasn't just working with Dong Dante. She was falling. Slowly, dangerously, irreversibly, which made everything that came next so much worse. She told Keela everything. Dong, the money, the confrontation at the club, the deal. All of it poured out like water from a cracked dam. She expected the full Keela Torres hurricane, screaming, pacing, dramatic hand gestures, rapid-fire questions in 3 languages. Instead, silence. Keela just sat there, quiet, still. And that stillness was so deeply wrong, so fundamentally unlike her, that it scraped against Agatha's instincts like fingernails on glass. You don't seem surprised, Agatha said slowly. I'm processing. No. You always process at maximum volume, Keela. Right now you're quiet, and you're never quiet. Agatha leaned forward. What do you know? Keela's eyes dropped to the floor. Keela, the nightclub where I work? Keela's voice came out small, stripped of its usual armor. It's partially owned by the Dante family. I've known about them for over a year. The words landed like a slap across an open wound. I set you up with Julian because he was safe, Keela continued, faster now, like she was trying to outrun her own guilt. A boring American lawyer, predictable, normal. I wanted you nowhere near this world. I was trying to... You knew? Agatha's voice shook, not with weakness, but with the specific kind of fury that only comes when love has been betrayed. You knew these people existed. You knew what they were. And you let me walk into that restaurant without a single word of warning? I was protecting you, protecting me by lying to my face, by keeping secrets while I sat across from a man who could have... She stopped, pressed her hand against her chest like she was holding something together. You are the one person I trusted, Keela. The one. In this entire country, you were it. Aga, please. How long have you known? Aga. How long? The silence lasted 3 seconds. It aged Agatha by 3 years. 14 months. Something cracked inside Agatha's chest. Not a clean break, a slow, splintering fracture. The kind that starts as a hairline fissure and spreads invisibly until one day the whole structure gives way. Duck, get out of my restaurant. Get out. Keela left, and the silence she left behind was louder than every argument they'd ever had combined. 3 days later, Agatha was wiping down tables when the front door opened. She looked up expecting a customer. It was not a customer. The man who walked in was tall, lean, impeccably dressed in a way that made the room feel smaller. He carried himself the way men carry themselves when they believe every room already belongs to them. And his smile, warm, generous, the kind of warmth that feels perfect until you realize there's nothing behind it. Like a painted fireplace, convincing from a distance, but step close enough and you feel no heat at all. He was carrying flowers. You must be Agatha. He placed them on the counter like he was decorating his own home. I'm Kwang, Dong's older brother. Her stomach fell through the floor. He sat down uninvited, crossed one leg over the other, looked around the restaurant with what appeared to be genuine appreciation. I can see why my brother is drawn to this place. It has soul. What do you want? Just to meet the woman who's accomplished something no one else has managed in years. He tilted his head. Making my brother feel something. She said nothing. He leaned forward, dropped his voice, still smiling, always smiling. Did Dong ever tell you why he really let you sit at that table? It wasn't fate, Agatha. It wasn't a happy accident. He let the pause stretch. He was expecting someone that night, a woman. Someone sent specifically to get close to him. His eyes locked onto hers. Someone who looked a great deal like you. The words entered her bloodstream like slow poison. She felt them spreading. Doubt, suspicion, a creeping sickness that wrapped around every good memory she'd built with Dong and squeezed. I don't believe you. You don't have to. He stood, straightened his jacket, left the flowers on the counter like a gift that was actually a grenade. But ask him yourself. And when he answers, watch his eyes. She confronted Dong that same night. Was I a substitute? No preamble, no softening, just the wound ripped open and held up for him to see. Dong's walls went up so fast she could almost hear them slamming into place, steel behind his eyes, with every trace of warmth retreating behind fortifications built from years of betrayal. Kwang came to see you? Answer the question, Dong. Agatha! Look me in my eyes, right now, and tell me I wasn't a stand-in for somebody else. Silence. That unbearable, suffocating silence that seemed to follow them into every moment that mattered. You were never a substitute, he said finally. But I can't explain everything yet. That is not good enough. The woman they planned to send that night, she was a weapon, Agatha, planted by Kwang's people, designed to get close to me and dismantle everything from the inside. She never showed up. His voice cracked. Barely, a fracture in concrete, but she heard it. And then you sat down and looked at me like I was still worth something. Like I was still human. His hands tightened at his sides. Nobody had done that in years. You were never a replacement. You were the only real thing that's happened to me in longer than I can remember. Her chest ached. Everything inside her wanted to stay. To reach across the distance between them and hold on, to believe him completely and let herself fall. But trust built in the dark is not the same as trust, and she was so exhausted from standing in the dark. She turned. walked to the door, put her hand on the handle. "Agatha, I need time, Dong. I need to be able to see clearly, and right now, I can't see anything." She walked out, and he let her go. But when the door closed, his hands were shaking. 3 nights later, Agatha locked up her restaurant. Mutt stepped into the alley behind the building, took 2 steps toward the street, and everything went dark. When her vision returned, she was in a concrete room, fluorescent lights humming overhead like a headache made audible, and seated across the table from her, calm, composed, smiling that heatless smile, was Kwang Dante. "Before you say anything dramatic," he said, "I want you to hear me out. You kidnapped me. I gave you a private invitation. Let's not get lost in semantics." His offer was laid out like a business proposal. Clean. Simple. Help him dismantle Dong's operation from the inside. Feed him information, names, schedules, weaknesses, and in return, enough money to go home to Lagos, rebuild her mother's restaurant on the same street in Surulere, never look over her shoulder again. "You don't belong in this world, Agatha." His voice was almost gentle. Almost. "You know that. Deep down, you've always known. Dong will use you until there's nothing left to use, and then he'll move on. That's what men like him do. That's what men like us do." For one terrible, honest, devastating moment, she saw it. Lagos. The warm air, red soil, her mother's grave, flowers on the headstone every Sunday. A life without looking over her shoulder, without questioning every word, without loving someone whose hands carried weight she might never fully understand. Peace. Then Kwang leaned back, crossed his legs, and said, "You're a smart girl, Agatha. Don't let your emotions override your judgment." The spell shattered like glass hitting concrete. She had heard those words before. A different voice, and a different continent, the same suffocating condescension. Her father, standing in the doorway of their home in Lagos, looking at her mother like her feelings were a design flaw. Like loving him had been a mistake she should have been intelligent enough to avoid. "You sound exactly like my father," Agatha said, and her voice had changed. The trembling was gone. What remained was something tempered, something that had passed through fire and come out harder on the other side. "And he was the biggest liar I have ever known." Kwang's smile faltered. For the first time since she'd met him, it actually faltered. "I'm not your smart girl," she continued. Every word landed with weight. "I'm a grown woman who has survived things you couldn't even spell. And I don't negotiate with men who have to drag people into rooms to feel powerful." The door behind her didn't open gently. It came off its hinges. Dong didn't walk into that warehouse. He erupted through it. And the man who stood in that doorway was not the composed, calculating Don she had come to know. Every mask was gone, every wall demolished. What stood there was just a man, terrified, furious, shaking, staring at Agatha like she was oxygen and he'd been underwater for years. Kwang. His voice was barely above a whisper, but every person in that room felt it at the base of their spine. "If you touched her..." "Relax, little brother. We were just talking." The brothers faced each other across the warehouse floor, every scar between them, every betrayal, every broken promise, and every drop of shared blood that had curdled into something toxic, compressed into a single unbearable look. "You would sacrifice everything for this woman?" Kwang asked, tilting his head like he was studying something he genuinely could not comprehend. "The family? The empire? Everything our father bled to build? She is the only thing in my life worth protecting. She's a foreigner, Dong, a nobody from..." "Finish that sentence. I dare you to finish it." Silence. The kind that precedes an earthquake. The kind where the ground hasn't moved yet, but everything standing on it already knows it's about to. Then Kwang's men shifted. Dong's men responded. The warehouse erupted. Rapid Korean, bodies repositioning, loyalty being tested in real time, alliances cracking and reforming in the space between heartbeats. But Agatha didn't freeze. She didn't scream. She didn't collapse into a corner and wait for someone to save her. She moved. On Kwong's desk, half covered by a leather jacket, she saw them. Documents, pages covered in names, account numbers, locations, the skeleton of Kwang's shadow network, every alliance he'd been building in secret for months, evidence that could bury him or hand Dong the leverage to end this war permanently. She grabbed the papers, folded them against her chest, pressed them over her heart like armor, and held on. When it was over, when Kwong had disappeared into the soul night like smoke through a cracked window and his men had scattered, the warehouse fell silent, not peacefully silent, yet the kind of silent that follows something violent, heavy, ringing, bruised. Somewhere in the distance, a metal door slammed shut and the echo traveled through the concrete walls like a final heartbeat. Agatha stood in the center of it all. Her dress was torn at the shoulder, dust in her hair, her breathing ragged, but her hands steady. She walked to Dong, held out the documents. He looked at the papers, then at her, and what she saw in his eyes was something entirely new, not protectiveness, not concern, not even love, though that was there too, burning quietly underneath. Respect. "You could have run," he said. "I have been running my entire life." Her voice was calm now, clear like water. "From Lagos, from debt, from my father's ghost, from every person who ever looked at me and saw something small." She met his eyes, not looking up at him, not below him, but levelly, directly, as an equal. "I am done running, Dong. This life, it will change you. Or maybe I will change it." He extended his hand. Not as a king to a subject, not as a protector to someone who needed saving, as a partner, an equal, a recognition that the woman standing in front of him was not someone he had rescued. She was someone who had chosen, with full knowledge and open eyes, to stand beside him. She took his hand, and in that cold warehouse on the outskirts of Seoul, with dust settling and the echo of chaos still ringing off the walls, a girl who once counted crumpled bills on the floor of a failing restaurant in a country that wasn't hers. I became something the Dante Empire had never seen before, not Dong's girlfriend, not his weakness, not a pawn or a plan or a placeholder, the queen. If this story cracked something open inside you tonight, if you felt Agatha's fire in your own chest and recognized it as something that lives in you too, then you are exactly where you belong. You are family. Subscribe to Afro-Korean Stories TV so you never miss what comes next. Like this video because this story deserves to be seen. Leave a comment telling us, what would you have done in that warehouse? Would you have taken Kwang's deal and gone home to safety, or grabbed those documents? We read every single comment, everyone. And stay with us, because there is one final moment you need to hear. One more truth that changes everything. Later that night, Agatha stood alone in Dong's penthouse. Seoul stretched beneath the floor-to-ceiling windows like a galaxy someone had pressed flat. Millions of lights, millions of lives, and somewhere among them, a version of herself she could barely recognize anymore. For the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt peace. Not the absence of pain. Real peace, the kind that comes when you finally stop apologizing for who you are. Her phone buzzed on the desk. Unknown number. She stared at the screen, let it ring once, twice, 3 times. Then she answered. "Hello?" Breathing on the other end, hesitant, heavy. Then a voice she hadn't heard in 14 years, a voice that had filled her childhood with promises, her adolescence with questions, and her adult life with a wound she'd never fully closed. "Agatha, it's your father." Her blood turned to ice. Her grip on the phone tightened until her knuckles went white. "Before you hang up," he said, quickly, urgently, like a man running out of time. "I know about Dong Dante. I know about the family. I know about everything." Her throat sealed shut. When the word came out, it was barely a whisper. "How?" A pause, the longest, heaviest pause of her entire life. The kind of silence that rearranges every single thing you thought you understood about your own history. "Because I used to work for them, Agatha." His voice dropped. Rough, almost broken. "Why do you think I really left Lagos?" A breath. "Why do you think I really left you?" Silence. Then, barely audible, or like a man pressing his last breath into the phone. "I'ma worry, Agatha. Don't worry. 3 words." The same 3 words she whispered to her mother's photograph every night. The same 3 words she thought were hers, born from her own grief, her own survival, her own stubborn refusal to collapse. They were never hers. They were his. He had planted them inside her before she was old enough to remember, and she had been carrying a piece of her father in her mouth every single day, without ever knowing it. The line went dead. Agatha stood motionless, phone pressed to her ear, listening to nothing but the hollow tone of a disconnected call and the sound of her own world rewriting itself from the beginning. The photograph, the one Kwang had slid across the table in that dark room. Her standing in Lagos, taken 6 months before she ever came to Seoul. A photo she never knew existed. Her father's words echoed through her skull like a bell struck in an empty church. "I used to work for them." And the question that had been burning beneath every moment, every coincidence, every wrong table, every perfectly timed disaster, since the very first night. Was any of this an accident? Now she had her answer. No, none of it was. And the most terrifying part was that she still didn't know who had truly been pulling the strings. Her father, Kwang, Julian, Kao, or Dong. This story is written by Afro-Korean Stories TV, an original production. All characters are fictional.